Part 1. The Unexpected Discovery. The sun blazed mercilessly across Mineral Colony X-12, a harsh landscape that most people would describe as nothing more than a wasteland. Jay Park wiped the sweat from his forehead, his weathered work boots kicking, up clouds of rust-colored dust with each step. At 25, he had already spent half his life working the unforgiving terrain, following in his father's footsteps as a mining technician. Today felt different. Something about the morning air seemed charged with an unusual energy. Jay's equipment beeped softly, tracking mineral deposits and geological readings, but his instincts told him something more interesting was waiting to be discovered. The colony's survival depended on finding valuable resources, and Jay had always been known for his sharp eye and intuition. As he scanned the horizon, a faint metallic glint caught his attention. Most workers would have dismissed it as another piece of abandoned mining equipment, but Jay knew this was something else entirely. The reflection didn't match the typical angular shapes of human-made machinery. It was almost organic in its irregular outline. Carefully he approached the location. Each step became more deliberate, his heart racing with a mixture of excitement and caution. The rocky terrain seemed to shift beneath his feet, as if trying to hide a secret. Years of experience had taught Jay that the most valuable discoveries often came when you least expected them. The spacecraft emerged slowly, like a ghost rising from the planetary grave. Half buried in the rocky terrain, its metallic hull told a story of a violent journey. Scorch marks and deep scratches covered its surface, speaking of a desperate escape or a catastrophic crash. This was no ordinary wreck. This was something completely unexpected. Jay's hands trembled slightly as he activated his communication device. Protocol demanded he report any unusual findings immediately, but something inside him hesitated. The colony's leadership was strict about potential alien encounters, often preferring to eliminate unknown risks rather than investigate them. The ship's exterior revealed intricate design patterns unlike anything Jay had ever seen. Subtle curves and seamless joints suggested advanced technology far beyond human capabilities. It wasn't just a spacecraft, it was a testament to engineering that challenged everything he understood about technological development. A sudden wind swept across the landscape, momentarily clearing the dust around the wreckage. For a brief second, Jay caught a glimpse of something moving inside the damaged vessel. Was it a reflection, a trick of light, or something more? His mind raced with possibilities. Discoveries like these could change everything, potentially securing his family's future, bringing recognition to the struggling mining colony, or revealing secrets about life beyond their small corner of the universe. The weight of potential knowledge pressed against his shoulders. Years of survival training kicked in. Jay knew he couldn't rush. Every movement needed to be calculated, every observation carefully documented. The line between a groundbreaking discovery and a fatal mistake was razor-thin in environments like these. As he inched closer to the spacecraft, the surrounding landscape seemed to hold its breath. Rocks that had witnessed countless solar cycles now became silent witnesses to what might be the most significant moment in human exploration history. Jay Park, a simple mining technician from a remote colony, stood at the precipice of a discovery that could rewrite everything humanity thought they knew about their place in the universe, and he was completely unaware of how much his life was about to change. The metallic hull of the spacecraft glinted again, almost like a wink, promising secrets that were waiting to be uncovered. Would you like me to continue with the next part of the story in a similar engaging and natural style? Part 2. First contact. The moment Jay breached the spacecraft's damaged entrance, the air changed. It wasn't just the temperature or the pressure. Something fundamental shifted. His training had prepared him for extreme environments, for unexpected challenges, but nothing could have readied him for what he was about to witness. Broken panels and twisted metal created a maze inside the vessel. Emergency lighting flickered weakly, casting strange shadows that seemed to dance with a life of their own. Jay moved carefully, each step calculated, his mining boots making minimal sound against the metallic floor. Then he saw it. The alien wasn't what he had imagined from countless stories and scientific documentaries. No terrifying monster or aggressive creature, but something entirely unexpected, vulnerable, almost fragile. Pale blue skin with a slight iridescent shimmer covered a humanoid form that looked more like a wounded traveler than a threat. Delicate respiratory patterns suggested life, but just barely. The being's chest moved with shallow rhythmic breaths that seemed more like a whisper than actual breathing. Its body was positioned awkwardly, trapped between a collapsed communication panel and a fractured navigation system. Jay's medical training from colony survival courses kicked in. He knew the risks: potential contamination, unknown biological threats, potential aggressive defense mechanisms. Colony protocols were crystal clear: report, isolate, and allow specialized teams to handle any extraterrestrial encounters. But protocols felt meaningless right now. Something about the alien's presence triggered an unexpected emotional response. Perhaps it was the vulnerability, the sense of being completely alone in a hostile environment. Jay remembered his grandmother's stories about compassion being the truest form of human strength. He checked his environmental suit's seals, ensuring complete protection. Slowly, methodically, he began assessing the alien's condition. No obvious external injuries, but internal damage was probable. The being's skin had a strange, translucent quality, allowing glimpses of complex internal structures that defied human understanding. A faint humming sound emerged from the alien, not from its mouth, but seemingly from its entire body. It wasn't a sound of pain, but something more like a communication, a subtle vibration that seemed to carry emotional undertones. Jay's hand hovered close, not touching, but near enough to feel the subtle energy radiating from the unconscious being. Years of working in isolated mining colonies had taught him to trust instincts, and right now, every instinct screamed that this was more than just a random encounter. The alien's eyes remained closed, but there was movement beneath its translucent eyelids. Rapid, almost imperceptible eye movements suggested complex neural activity. Was it dreaming, processing, communicating in ways humans couldn't comprehend? Equipment readings went crazy. Radiation levels, electromagnetic frequencies, temperature variations. Everything seemed to fluctuate unpredictably around the alien. Jay's standard monitoring devices struggled to make sense of the data, displaying chaotic, almost random information. He knew making a decision meant potentially risking everything. Reporting this could mean the alien would be immediately quarantined, possibly dissected, treated as nothing more than a scientific specimen. Keeping silent meant potential contamination, potential threat to the entire colony. But looking at the vulnerable being, Jay felt something deeper than logical reasoning. A connection, a shared sense of being lost, of surviving against overwhelming odds. In that moment, surrounded by the broken spacecraft with an unconscious alien breathing softly, Jay Park made a choice that would change everything, not just for himself, but potentially for two entire civilizations. He would help, no matter. The Co-Part 3, the dangerous rescue. The silence inside the damaged spacecraft felt heavy, charged with unspoken possibilities. Jay knew that every second counted. His mining experience had taught him about precision, how a millimeter could separate success from catastrophic failure. Extracting the alien would be like defusing the most complex mechanism he'd ever encountered. The being's body seemed to respond to atmospheric changes in ways completely unknown to human understanding. Its skin would shimmer slightly with each environmental shift, almost like a living protective mechanism. Jay's emergency medical kit contained standard colony supplies, basic stabilization equipment, thermal regulators, and emergency oxygen. Supplements. None of these were designed for extraterrestrial life forms. He would essentially be improvising a rescue mission with tools meant for human survival. Carefully, he positioned specialized lifting straps around the alien's body. Years of moving heavy mining equipment had developed muscles and instincts that now served a completely unexpected purpose. Each movement was deliberate, calculated to minimize potential additional damage. The alien's weight was unexpectedly different from human physiology. Sometimes it felt lighter, almost weightless, then suddenly dense and challenging to move. Jay realized this was more than a simple physical transportation. It was a delicate dance between two completely different biological systems. Sweat dripped down his forehead inside the protective suit. The colony's training never prepared him for scenarios like this. Rescue protocols, survival techniques, emergency medical procedures, they all seemed inadequate in this extraordinary moment. Strange energy patterns emerged around the alien's body. Electromagnetic readings on his equipment jumped erratically, creating visual displays that looked more like abstract art than scientific data. The being seemed to generate its own unique field of energy, responding to movement and environmental changes. Breathing became his primary focus. Slow, steady, controlled movements. Any sudden action could potentially destabilize the alien's already fragile condition. His mining experience of working in high-pressure environments suddenly felt like the perfect preparation for this unprecedented rescue. External communication was impossible. The spacecraft's damage had created a complete communication blackout. Jay was entirely alone, with no backup, no support system, just his instincts and limited resources. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily against his shoulders. Each centimeter of movement felt like a potential life-or-death decision. The alien's respiratory patterns remained inconsistent, sometimes barely perceptible, sometimes surprisingly strong. Its skin would occasionally emit a soft, pulsating glow that seemed to synchronize with some internal rhythm. Jay's hands, typically used to handling heavy mining equipment and precise geological tools, now moved with unprecedented gentleness. Years of rough work had been replaced by an almost artistic precision. One wrong move could mean the difference between saving a life and losing it forever. The spacecraft's interior seemed to react to their movement. Panels would shift slightly, circuits would momentarily reactivate, creating an environment that felt more like a living organism than a mechanical vessel. It was as if the entire ship was conscious, observing their extraction process. Temperature variations became another challenge. The alien's body temperature fluctuated wildly, creating localized environmental changes that challenged standard thermal regulation techniques. Jay's suit struggled to compensate, its systems pushed beyond their designed capabilities. Time seemed to stretch and compress simultaneously. What might have been minutes could have been hours. The line between reality and extraordinary experience blurred with each careful movement. As he finally managed to extract the alien from the wreckage, Jay realized this was more than a rescue. This was a moment of potential first contact, a bridge between two potentially completely different forms of existence. The alien's life hung in a balance more delicate than any scientific instrument could measure. Would you like me to continue with the next part of the story in a similar engaging and natural style? Part 4. Survival and Mystery. The journey back to the colony felt like traversing an impossible landscape. Jay's transport vehicle bounced across the rocky terrain, each movement potentially fatal for the fragile passenger. The alien lay secured in a makeshift medical containment unit, its body continuing to emit those strange pulsating energy signatures. Survival wasn't just about physical transportation. Every moment was a complex calculation of environmental conditions, biological stability, and pure instinct. Jay's hands gripped the vehicle's controls with a mixture of determination and barely contained fear. The colony's medical bay would be his only hope. A small, compact facility designed for mining-related injuries, it was about to face its most extraordinary challenge yet. Standard medical protocols seemed laughably inadequate against the mysterious being he was transporting. Temperature. Regulation became the first critical challenge. The alien's body seemed to have its own internal mechanism that defied standard thermal imaging. One moment it would appear freezing cold, the next generating heat signatures that would overwhelm standard monitoring equipment. Jay's mind raced with questions. Where did this being come from? What civilization could create a life form so fundamentally different from everything he understood? The spacecraft's design suggested technology centuries beyond human capabilities. Emergency medical. Systems flickered to life as he entered the medical bay. Specialized containment fields activated automatically, creating a protective environment that could adapt to potentially unknown biological threats. Years of mining colony preparation suddenly felt like a perfect prelude to this moment. The aliens' respiratory system continued its mysterious pattern. Breathing, if it could even be called that, seemed more like a complex communication system than a simple survival mechanism. Subtle vibrations emerged from its body, creating intricate energy, patterns that danced across medical scanning equipment. Jay's training kicked in: isolation protocols, emergency stabilization techniques, careful documentation. Each step was executed with precision born from years of working in extreme environments. But nothing could have prepared him for the complexity of this rescue. Biological markers appeared on medical screens, creating impossible readings. Cellular structures that seemed to shift and reconfigure themselves, energy patterns that defied standard scientific understanding, internal systems that looked more like advanced technological networks than organic tissue. The colony's limited medical equipment struggled to make sense of the data. Standard oxygen levels, cellular analysis, neural activity, everything was completely outside known parameters. Jay watched in a mixture of terror and fascination as the monitoring systems attempted to interpret the aliens' complex biological structure. Something extraordinary was happening. The alien's body seemed to be healing itself, adapting to the new environment with a speed and complexity that challenged everything Jay understood about biological survival. Cellular regeneration occurred at rates that seemed impossible, energy patterns realigning and restructuring with each passing moment. Isolation became both a protective measure and a scientific opportunity. The medical bay transformed into a living laboratory, with Jay as the primary observer of a potentially world-changing encounter. Every reading, every subtle change became a piece of a massive, incomprehensible puzzle. The colony's communication systems remained silent. Jay knew that reporting this discovery would change everything, not just for him, but potentially for entire human understanding of life beyond Earth. The weight of this knowledge pressed against him like a physical force. Hours passed. The alien remained in a state between consciousness and something entirely unknown. Its body continued its mysterious dance of energy and adaptation, challenging every scientific principle Jay had ever learned. As night fell across the harsh planetary landscape, Jay realized he was standing at the precipice of something extraordinary. This was more than a rescue. This was a potential bridge between two completely different forms of existence. The mystery was just beginning. Would you like me to continue with the final part of the story in a similar engaging and natural style? Part 5. Unexpected Connection. First signs of consciousness came unexpectedly. It wasn't a sudden movement or a dramatic awakening, but a subtle shift in the alien's energy field. Jay had been monitoring the medical screens, his eyes heavy from hours of continuous observation. When he noticed the change, soft, luminescent pulses began emanating from the being's body, not random but purposeful. Each pulse seemed to carry a complexity of information that human language could never capture. It was communication, but not in any form Jay had ever encountered. The medical bay's sterile environment suddenly felt alive. Equipment that had been silently monitoring began responding to the alien's awakening. Screens flickered, with patterns that looked more like intricate dance movements than scientific data. Something fundamental was happening. Jay's hand instinctively moved closer to the containment field. Years of mining colony survival had taught him to be cautious, but something deeper, a sense of connection, pulled him forward. The alien's eyes remained closed, but there was a definite awareness spreading through the room. Communication began through the most unexpected medium: energy. Waves of subtle vibrations started transferring between the alien's body and the surrounding equipment. It wasn't just information exchange. It felt like a profound conversation happening beyond human comprehension. Images began forming on the medical screens, not digital representations, but something more organic. Memories, experiences, cosmic landscapes that defied human understanding. Jay watched in absolute amazement as entire civilizations seemed to unfold in milliseconds. The alien's body started to shift, not physically moving, but transforming at a cellular level. Its skin became translucent, revealing complex internal systems that looked more like advanced technological networks than biological structures. Each transformation carried a message, a piece of a massive universal puzzle. Jay realized this was far more than a rescue. This was a profound moment of first contact, a bridge between two completely different forms of existence. The being wasn't just sharing information, it was offering a glimpse into an entirely different perspective of universal existence. Memories flooded the room. Planetary systems beyond human imagination, technological advancements that made human achievements look primitive, cosmic journeys that spanned multiple dimensions. The aliens' experience was a living library of universal knowledge. The colonies, communication systems remained silent, unaware of the extraordinary exchange happening in the medical bay. Jay stood as the sole witness to a moment that could potentially rewrite everything humanity understood about life, technology, and cosmic existence. Strange mathematical equations began forming in the air, not as digital projections, but as living, breathing energy patterns. Complex scientific principles that seemed to bend the very understanding of physics danced around the medical bay. Jay watched, completely mesmerized. Hours passed, but time seemed meaningless. The aliens' communication continued, a complex dance of energy, information, and profound universal understanding. Each moment revealed layers of knowledge that challenged everything Jay had ever learned. The being's purpose became gradually clear. It wasn't a random traveler, but a messenger. Someone or something had sent this extraordinary life form with a specific mission, a warning, a connection, an invitation to something larger. As consciousness fully returned, the alien's first actual movement was unexpected. A subtle gesture, more like a wave of energy than a physical movement, reached out towards Jay. It wasn't threatening. It was an invitation. In that moment, Jay understood something profound. This wasn't just about scientific discovery. This was about connection, about understanding that the universe was far more complex, far more interconnected than humanity had ever imagined. The rescue was complete, but the real journey was just beginning. Would you like me to elaborate on any part of the story or discuss its potential implications? Would you like me to continue with the next part of the story in a similar engaging and natural style?